Hey, Max.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Move Mondays. We have extra exciting news today, but I think first we should go around the room and introduce ourselves. I'm Max. I'm an engineer on ecosystem.
I'm Sherry. I'm an engineer running DevNet.
I'm HC, leading our Asian go-to-market strategies.
I'm Tukun. I'm working on blockchain, I guess.
I'm Bo. I'm working on ecosystem, software engineer.
Kent on ecosystems.
Mo, I'm a co-founder and CEO.
I'm Alex, leading the legal team.
David, I'm building a layer 1 for everyone.
That's awesome.
Aline, I work on cryptography.
Greg, and I work on ecosystem.
Ecosystem is slowly winning out. We got the numbers. Before we jump to community questions, we have a bunch of community highlights. Thank you to Sergey Pimenov, who has a Aptos core client in JavaScript with NFT support. It's awesome. You should take a look. ScariOT has published a faucet bot for Telegram, which is amazing. There's a Aptos Wallet Chrome extension by the folks at Martian DAO. That's Andrew and APTGet123. There's a cool video demo on it. And there is a lot of special mentions through the content creation and the memes channels. We absolutely love seeing those. You all are amazing, and James, I believe, is going to continue leading a bunch of fantastic community events there over the coming weeks. So thank you for contributing memes. We've been printing them out, as you can see back there. This is our main meme room for Move Mondays. So thank you very much, everyone, for really making this a fantastic community altogether. You want to talk about the release notes?
Sure. We decided to name our Thursday release day as a Throwaway Thursday. So please tune in to the release channel every Thursday. Check out our new stuff. It's amazing to see that we have more than 14,000 nodes connecting to the DevNet. This is really amazing. Thank you all for believing in our project and then be part of our communities and help us test our network. It's a spread across more than 40 countries, which is also very amazing to see. I'm sure you all being experienced different language channels and being part of this community. So thank you all. And we have lots of behind-the-scenes efforts for scalable tables in Move. We have reduced the complexity of the default validator deployment, and the initial staking delegation reward framework have checked in. So if you're interested in checking out our proof of stake modules, please take a look of our repo on GitHub. Many more updates in the background for the CI/CDs, our Rust versions, and documentation. And a really big thanks to our community for the contribution across all type of stuff like documentations, the example for TypeScript, and cleanup for our code base. So thank you all. This is all great. Again, for the operators, make sure when you're upgrading, wiping the data, deleting your old storage, and follow our instructions. And thank you all for our community member who's been helping others on upgrading nodes. Yep, that's it.
And next up, we have the exciting announcement of incentivized testnets. There is an article that went live on Medium this morning. It's been retweeted a bunch, and David can lead us through what that's going to look like.
Yeah, so I don't want to spend too much time here because I'm sure hopefully everybody's had a chance to at least skim through the article. We'd like to actually open the floor mostly for questions to see where folks are curious, but I'll at least give a high-level overview of what the plans are here. But effectively, we're in this together. This is a community-driven effort to bring a layer 1 into reality, and we're going to need everybody's help to build it and to prove that it's ready for production environments. And to that point, we're going to have a 4-phase incentivized testnet set up where we're going to go through multiple steps to validate that the blockchain and the pieces around it are ready. And that's where you folks come in to be hugely valuable to help us work together on that with the goal of I think we've got node operators, developers, auditors, and ecosystem builders being able to jump in and contribute. The one thing I want to call out is this incentivized testnet is just a subset of our larger incentivization efforts that we're going to be launching throughout the next several weeks and months as we approach our mainnet launch towards Q3 of this year. So there will be more and more information coming out as we make progress. Now, with that being said, I'd like to call out that the various 4 different rounds of incentivized testnet. The first goal is our decentralized startup, and we're gonna begin registration promptly on May 13th. So that gives us about another 4-ish weeks to get everything in place so that you folks can actually contribute and get into the space, register, and get comfortable with the toolings in that space. And just to call out like a couple of the major things that we're going to be providing the next couple of weeks are, right now, you can run a local testnet, but that's not the same thing as actually running a validator that connects into a broader network. So we're going to actually be providing both Helm charts, Terraform charts, as well as documentation so you can construct a multi-node validator network running on production machinery and getting comfortable with running one or more validators, understanding the end-to-end process of validator maintenance, as well as going through some of the tooling that helps build up these networks. Using that information, you're going to be able to contribute into our decentralized startup, which is the incentivized testnet 1, in which the primary goals there are to see the community come in, make sense of the tooling, and then be able to remain online and participate in our consensus protocols through the completion of that testnet that will go on for approximately 2 weeks. Assuming that goes well, which I'm confident that we'll work together to make sure that it does, we're going to move on to the second incentivized network, or test network, which is going to be staking. And this is where Zakun's efforts will come to fruition along with everybody else's to prove out that our staking algorithms actually work, that delegation is supported, rewards are well handled, and so the goal here is just to see that the community can come together, run these things, produce funds that can be used for delegation into various different validator nodes, and that all the machinery is working there. That again will probably happen sometime in June, and we anticipate a very similar schedule with incentivized testnet 1. Moving on from there, we then move on to governance and upgrades. One of the things that I really love about the technology that we're building here is that we provide 0 downtime upgrades for both software as well as frameworks. And so we can actually support bringing in a new consensus algorithm without taking down the network. Obviously, we're not going to try to do that in the midst of our incentivized testnets because, we want to, test, we want to, crawl before we walk and walk before we run. So the goal here in incentivized testnet 3 is to simply work through the frameworks that we have to support these types of upgrades. And that's our decentralized governance, that's an on-chain voting framework, and we're simply going to just go collectively work together to, say, bump up a number inside of the framework together to say we went from version 0 to version 1, and that's going to be the success story there. We're also going to be looking to start supporting validators to join the network after launch, as well as some additional cool technical things that we've been working on, such as advanced backup and restore technology that lets you bootstrap easily from various cloud service providers like S3. And then we land into our final planned incentivized testnet, which we call dynamic validator topology, but this is basically, let's have fun, let's see how far we can push the limits of the software that we've been building, that you've been experimenting with. We're anticipating this to be the August timeframe, and in this space, we just want to push the network to the maximum number of validators as possible, with the anticipated goal of having a notion known as subcommittees, where you may have a lot of participants capable of being validators, but we're going to select, for performance and security and reliability reasons, a subset of those, and we're going to iterate through multiple different subsets. We're going to allow folks to be joining the network throughout the entirety of the incentivized testnet. And the other aspect to that would also be to vet out our validator DDoS protection framework. And so in this goal, what we've effectively done in our Aptos framework is we want to have the validators running in a safe performance environment so that they can push through as many transactions as possible. And so we rely on full nodes to help funnel the traffic safely and effectively upstream to the validators. And we're going to validate, one, that you have this kind of layering so that arbitrary arbitrary folks can't just get connected to your validator, and two, that your validator doesn't just topple over because of activity on the internet. And that's going to be our DDoS validation efforts there. So we're looking forward to participation in that space. And as I said, we've got the initial dates up there for incentivized testnet 1. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have more and more information around the specifics of the goals and how you can actually start applying for that. You can see we also have a nice section there on community opportunities where you can jump into the Discord channel. And we do not have a link to our community forum, but there is one, and we'll update the documentation. We'll update the Medium post shortly, as well as post that more broadly. But be looking forward for more community opportunities in short order. There's a whole bunch of frequently asked questions that we can go over in more detail in this medium, as well as you can see our technical roadmap there. You can see we have a lot of really exciting things that are going to be coming out over the next several months as we lead into our mainnet launch. And so with that, I will pass it back.
Cool. Thank you, David. Many exciting updates.
Yeah.
A lot of cool stuff coming. Unless there's any other updates anyone else wants to give, I think we can jump into questions. Cool. So, Amiram asks, currently layer 2 is considered because of the speed and low transactions. What do we think is the most important feature for layer 1 protocols? I think it's an interesting question. We can talk from the perspective of Diem, I guess. We have safety in the form of move. We have performance and safety via our consensus, and I think we have some fairly interesting and well thought through contracts around staking and governments and how all of this will work together in a vibrant ecosystem once we reach mainnet. I think, of course, there's opportunity for L2s for very specific high throughput applications, but we really at this point are focused on building the best layer 1 we can for everyone.
Yeah, I think high availability, accessibility, low risk, and extensibility. And as Max was alluding there, like, we're not trying to build an L1 that solves all the problems. We're trying to build an L1 that provides a foundation for really amazing things happening in the Web3 space. So partnerships are really important from our perspective.
Sergey asks, how do I get and show the current gas price to form a transaction for the appropriate amount?
I think I may have mentioned in the chat thread a couple times there. We have plans to start revealing an API where you can actually, if you're running your own full node, you can query that API and say how expensive would this operation to be. The reality is, in order to know the gas price, the only way to really get that is to execute the transaction or effectively execute the transaction. And so that's not something we can trivially reveal a priori or even on a full node that we're hosting, just because it's unfortunately a really great avenue for DDoS attacks where, I send very expensive transactions and I block up the entire service. But we can definitely provide something so that if you're running your own full node, you can get those numbers. And as we move into, I think it was incentivized testnet 2, we do have a call to action there where we will have a revised gas, what the heck is that phrase? Fee schedule, thank you. And hopefully that will be something that we can make a little bit more pragmatic with, some sort of schema, YAML file or whatever that you can potentially import and more deterministically compute your gas without even having to go to a third-party service.
And it's possible also in the future that we can have gas hints as in the SDKs for authors of contracts that know ahead of time generally how much operations cost, and given a fee of what the current gas price is, can come up with a reasonable estimation.
But for now, please don't treat gas as just a way to minimize potential DDoS attacks on our network. It's not intended to suggest this is going to be what costs are on the network. The goal is for costs to simply be there to mitigate DDoS attacks on our network. It's not the way that we're thinking about rewards and other efforts like that.
I wonder how the validators decentralized TPS competition is already over after revealing Solana problems.
I guess like the point is, as we just talked in the release node, right now we have more than 14,000 full nodes connecting to the DevNet. And then it's spread across 40 different countries, running by like varieties of different operators, either coming from individuals, node provider companies, enterprise, and all type of partnerships. So I don't think we will have a huge problem getting into decentralization like other protocols did. One of the important reasons we think that's the reason is because the low barrier for entrance on our protocol. So we don't request every node operators to use specialized or very hard to get type of hardware, and we intended to keep it that way for mainnet as well. We wanted to make sure everybody have a fair chance, and then make it actually feasible and then possible for people who wanted to invest in running a node will be able to run a node.
Cool. Thank you. Sergey would like us to add additional things into our transfer events. We can definitely take a look at that, of course.
Submit an issue.
Yeah, yes, please submit a GitHub issue is the best way to make sure that that doesn't fall off the table for us. A great question from item 6 around the future of Move. Where's the right place to suggest and implement Move-related PRs? In Aptos or directly upstream. So recently, this week, there was a new GitHub that was formed, the Move Foundation. And so between all of the different networks that are working with Move, that's going to be the central place to come together and try to push the future of Move as a language forward altogether for the greater good of the ecosystem. So we can drop a link to that probably in our dev resources. We may add an update pointing to that repo, but that would be the best place to take a look at the latest state of Move and also open any PRs.
We can share the link to the repo afterwards in the channel. Yeah, it's move-language/move. That's the new repo.
Yeah. So here's also wondering if we can add a timestamp to the transfer events and received events.
Once again, submit an issue and put everything in that you are requesting, and we'll take a look at it.
Yes, I would also potentially say that if you're looking at events and it does have the version in it, versions via the transactions API can be correlated to a timestamp. So while that's not necessarily the cleanest API of having to make 2 requests, at this point that is also the easiest way to convert from a version into the timestamp of when the version was actually committed.
The other thing you can always do, if timestamps are important, you can always put the timestamps directly into your event itself.
Yeah.
There's always trade-offs here between how much data is being stored, how much data is being pushed through the APIs, and since not everybody's going to need those timestamps, it may make sense to think through the problem that you're trying to solve there.
What about getting into the first 100 testnet participants, including those community members who are in touch every day, who have already made good contributions? I think how the 100 are going to be decided is definitely still something that is a work in progress, but we definitely want to make sure that it's an open process and that as many people, that basically everyone has a chance to potentially be in the 100 side.
Mind you, it's the first incentivized testnet.
Yeah.
As we make progress, there are going to be more and more slots leading up to the final incentivized testnet where I hope, otherwise it's a failure on our part, that it is generally open so that almost everybody that is eligible is capable of participating.
Oh, we have some interesting technical questions. Is block STM something under consideration for development or a core feature that will be implemented for Aptos? Moreover, is it unique to Aptos or something Aptos is inherently optimized for, given the functionality of parallel account transactions?
So it's already implemented, and hopefully we will release that in this week's DevNet. If not, next week for sure. And if it's not unique to Aptos, we have a hope that we can generalize the interface and maybe make it like a contribution for the community. Like you can run it for Ethereum as well, but that's more about the future work.
Is BFT a way to power a proof of stake approach for consensus? How intense will BFT be in terms of resources and energy consumption?
Yes, we are going to use BFT to power the POS consensus, and it will not be very energy consuming compared to proof of work. It's very similar to the pure proof of stake. But it's based on the voting mechanism.
Yeah. In this model, you only use energy for computing your transactions and doing a little bit of signature verification. And so it's extremely lightweight compared to proof of work. I think, I don't know how accurate this is, but I think Ethereum folks are claiming that a move to proof of stake would result in 99.95% savings of energy.
Can you please give some best practices on updating a full node while using Docker? Should we delete the volume and do a Docker compose down, or is there a better alternative?
There is a release upgrade instruction documentation on our the website, but if you find the instructions are not clear and not easy to follow, please also file a GitHub issues, and with your questions, we can totally update the documentations with more details and then command. But keep in mind, like, since everybody using different environment and operating systems, sometimes it's really hard to cover the commands works for everybody. And please post your questions in the dev node ops channel whenever you have anything, because this community is amazing. We see a lot of folks as a node operator help out all the times and chime in and help you answer questions. So feel free to tag us or posting the channels. We will get your question answered, and we will make sure we keep improving the documentation. Thanks for the feedback.
I can't get the right digest despite having pulled from the latest DevNet. I think that is a fantastic question for the DevNode Ops channel. Many people there, us and also a lot of community members, can definitely help debug and get you to a good state. What criteria are used when choosing a validator? Many will be, but we haven't worked through all of those yet. Registration and all the requirements for participation, for nodes, for liveliness, and for whatever international legal requirements we also have to uphold. All of those will be published very soon. We are strongly committed to our May 16th start date for testnet 1. So you know that worst case before then, right? So we have a month to get that to you, and we definitely will. Are there any quantum security protocols being studied that start from block 0 and avoid problems in the future?
That's probably for Lin.
I don't think we're considering quantum protocols right now. I mean, it's something we can. The overhead of, let's say, a quantum signature scheme is much higher than a normal signature scheme. I think we need to keep eyes on developments in quantum computing, and if we're concerned, we can switch. Just so you know, if there is progress in quantum computing, it's not just blockchains that will be completely, in big problems. HTTPS won't work, nothing will work, everybody will have really big problems. It's something we can look into depending on the evolution of quantum computing.
The other thing, just to call out from a technical perspective, is we've designed our blockchain to be compatible with future possibilities. So if we want to introduce new crypto algorithms across the board, or new protocols, new whatever have you not, the entire framework is very agile. And so if there does come a time and place where it does seem pertinent, we can easily introduce these new schemes, and as long as the governance agrees that we can move forward, then we'll have no issue bringing that on board. But as Aline said, there is substantial performance overhead in introducing that, and if we're trying to be very cognizant of both performance and being green, there is a bit of tension there.
Yep. We will also test this upgradability in some of the phase in the incentivized testnet.
Could you comment on the implementation details of a potential event and transaction scheduler? This is from Alex. Yes. I think that this is something that we were talking about last week.
It's a discussion from Friday morning.
Yeah, we have not had a chance to dig into that one. But effectively, one of the conversations that we've been having with folks in the community is it'd be really great if we could have like a blast of a whole bunch of parallel operations in a single block, but then somehow unify the outcomes of those at the end of the block. And so that would effectively require some sort of specific transaction or operation that allows some amount of serialization and doing that in a consistent pattern. And I'm probably butchering the explanation there horribly, but this is, you might be familiar with like map, which just pushes a whole bunch of parallel jobs, and reduce it brings them all back together. And so we're going to be exploring things that we can introduce into the Aptos framework that would provide this really cool feature for high performance applications on the network.
It is something we are exploring, but it is definitely not something that we have had time over the weekend to explore necessarily.
I don't know about you, but I've got 5 implementations.
Well, there you go. Dear Aptos, can you show what you have hanging on the wall next to the logo?
We could certainly try, but I don't know how good our camera is.
It's not the camera. We're only able to broadcast, I think, at 720p. So
You should take a picture of it.
yeah, why
Yes,
don't we
we will share a picture of this like afterwards.
get you folks a
But-
4K photo?
We're trying to rotate those memes we have right next to the logo. It's all from our meme channels, content creation channel. So thank you all the people who made this happen. So this is amazing.
I was gonna say there's a lot of white space, so we need
Yes.
way more. We need a lot more beans. So keep them coming.
All right.
Will the test net have stress tests or an adversarial focus periods?
Stress tests for sure, because that's, I mean, we're even doing stress tests right now on DevNet, as Sherry alluded to, I think in previous Move Mondays. Adversarial, I suspect there's going to be a lot of interesting things that happen out there. I think it's an open question of whether or not we do incentivize adversarial behavior, but as you can see, some of the goals are still in the brainstorming phase, and I would actually love for community to contribute where you think we could actually be pushing the boundary of what we accomplish in the incentivized testnets. Remember, this is our incentivized testnet, as in the global R and not just Aptos' labs incentivized testnet.
And we will have better guidelines for what we are looking for and what's kind of outside of the bounds.
Yeah.
Depending on the specific incentivized testnet that we're at. We will also definitely have bug bounties and all of those fantastic incentivized adversarial reporting from a security perspective as well. Does DDoS mitigation evaluation include network DDoS or spam transaction only DDoS? Are there plans for a Sentry architecture?
Yes, if you go through our GitHub repo, you will see a proposal for a noise terminator slash multifaceted thing. That would be effectively our equivalent to some aspect of Sentry. We also have mempools in the fold nodes that also provide a component like Sentry does. And so these, in coordination with each other, is effectively what we're imagining would provide both transaction spam mitigation as well as network traffic spam mitigation.
Question from Telegram. What IDE is used to develop Move smart contracts? Are there any syntax hinting and highlighting plugins?
So for that, if you look at the awesome Move, there's a couple of recommendations. We've actually landed on one that we're pretty excited about, so we'll move that into our getting started documentation so that you folks can see what the Aptos recommendation is. We do have plans at some point in time to start building something that's substantially more Aptos centric, especially since each flavor of Move does have unique facets. For instance, our version of Move will be the one that has tables in it for large-scale data accesses. And so it's very pertinent that we do actually get something that makes it easy to develop on Aptos and not just Move independently.
When we say we'll make running nodes accessible in, the Discord chat keeps jumping, accessible in terms of hardware terms, do they require NVMe? That's still the minimum.
I think there's definitely going to be some levels of requirement. It's not going to be like you can run it on your smartphones or you can run it in any random hardware, but what we're trying to say here is we are determined to make it like it's very easy to get. It's not something like impossible for everybody or have to invest quite a large amount of monies or resources to make this happen. That's our ways, like at least like a majority of the people who wanted to run a node will be able to get access to a hardware that fits our requirement.
It wouldn't make sense for us to have an incentivized testnet that costs more money to participate in it than you would see as an outcome.
Yeah.
Also, we have different goals where some cases we might want to be pushing the network really hard. In other cases, we may be wanting to just expand the maximum size of the network. And so you can imagine at different phases, we may be either setting different requirements or, I think that's probably the reality is we'll probably just have potentially different requirements. But we're also looking for feedback from the community about resource consumption. We're still brainstorming about like different things that, different goals and incentives that might align with you folks. And so like, just to throw something out there, you folks are gonna be running these machines on different services that we hadn't even thought about considering. And so you being able to funnel in the associated costs and complexity and all these other different aspects back to us, like a survey at the end of each one, will greatly inform our decision making as well as support your colleagues in the space on how to run a validator effectively.
Yeah, tell us how much it costs for you even right now to run a full node. We'd love to hear that.
Do we know, is NVMe actually required right now?
It's not.
No. Yeah. So NVMe isn't required right now, and I think it would be very interesting actually to see at what level of TPS does various cloud service hard drive start to fall behind. But NVMe is definitely not the requirement for now.
Mm-hmm.
Question from Stewie in Telegram. Are you guys planning to have a dedicated channel for node operators?
We currently have one. The dev-node-ops is our any operation related to node. We will see if we need to split out or create more channels as we go approaching incentivized testnet.
It's still very early days as well, and so as things come together, we'll develop more and more ecosystem mechanisms to help coordinate and keep everybody together. And I don't know if James has anything he wants to throw in there, but I know he's got a massive vision of how to create great energy inside the space and just keep everybody really connected and unblocked and successful.
For now, get the role yourself in the roles channel if you are a node operator.
So an API question. I'm trying to fetch account transactions. Let's say I have 7 transactions on the account and they all have the same timestamp. Is this on purpose or is this something that is going to be fixed? Also, I cannot get any inbound transactions for the set account, only outbound. Inbound transactions are difficult.
So there's technically no such thing as an inbound transaction.
Yes.
All transactions are related to a sender. And so anybody that sends the transactions, you can identify the source of those transactions. If a transaction impacts another account that isn't the source account, the only way to learn that is either by looking at the delta output of the transaction and say, oh, these are all the different places in storage that were affected, or hoping, and mind you, it's really hoping, that the smart contracts emit events that indicate changes to accounts. And there's no guarantees there. Even for, I believe, the NFT smart contract, for instance, doesn't emit any events, if I remember correctly. And so, I dropped the ball there. It's really hard to figure out where the NFTs are going. And so, like, this is just one of the fundamental challenges inside the Web3 space. In terms of the timestamp one, if you could file an issue, I'd love to be able to poke at that because that seems weird.
Yeah. Either timestamp or reversion. It's also possible if you're looking at it in the Explorer. I think some of the timestamps have nano precision, but just for display, we truncate it to second, I believe. So it may be that the original transaction actually is higher time resolution.
And you can have multiple transactions executed in the same block as long as the transactions are all at the validator at the same time and they're in order. So you have say you have 0 through 10, all 11 transactions will execute within the same block as long as there's space to include them. And given the amount of load on the network right now, there's no reason why we should be able to handle that type of throughput.
but each of them will have a increasing version.
Version number will be distinct.
Additionally, something I'm working on is potentially adding some kind of way to, for a given transaction, see what the different write sets actually look like. So that's going in the indexer. That's going into our HTTP API, but that will also be added to our indexer. And hopefully in the future, that'll be able to make it much easier for you to see inbound transactions, basically, via being able to see this transaction affected these various accounts, for example. Is there any type of MEV resistance or liquidity staking on the horizon? Liquidity staking is definitely coming in various forums. We've talked to a few people. There's some people in the chat who've mentioned that they're working on various protocols, whether it's NFTs or liquidity staking or wallets or what have you. So we definitely welcome and absolutely love anyone who is coming to build on our platform for liquidity staking, for MEV resistance.
I think we're still deciding on the gas collections. Like we are not decided whether we're going to send this gas fee to the proposers or to all those validators, or we're just going to burn it. They are still under considerations.
Let's see. Can we expand on the general differences between full nodes and validators in regards to incentives?
It's too early to say what we'd expect from a full node incentivized plan. We have clear ideas around what we would incentivize for validators. I think that's probably the most that I can say about that. I mean, what I would be thinking about is what are the goals for full nodes, and I think that's more of a business plan. Like you can look at providers like Alchemy, I guess I don't need Bison Trails, which I think is now part of Coinbase, like that. Those are Blockworks business models, and so that's where I would expect that to be more focused. But something we're definitely thinking about.
One thing we discussed for full node incentives is like you can actually register your full node service on chain. So people can pay to connect to your full node and to stay synchronized all those data from your full node. And you can prioritize that, like you can provide better service to those who paid you some money, like versus free users.
Yeah. So I guess that goes back to the point that we had there about the advanced state synchronization. So assuming that all the pieces can come together in time, that may be a component for our full node incentivization at that phase.
So now we can switch to the questions that we've had on Twitch. Is there a technical documentation about how the Aptos blockchain works, please? That's there is a white paper, but it's...
So we have a white paper that's being drafted now. It will be available in the near future. And kudos to folks that have called out to me directly saying, could you please put a brief description of what is so cool about this blockchain on aptos.dev so that we know why we should develop on top of this platform. So hopefully within the next 24, 48 hours, we at least have a brief blurb about why we're here and why we think it's so cool, so that hopefully that excites the community. But yeah, these are things that we're definitely working towards. And you know, in the meantime, I hate to say it, but the code is documentation.
I think at least on our aptos.dev, the documentation website, in the basic section, we do have some different instructions or descriptions on each component and how the overall validator architecture looks like, what are the components working together, and a the life cycle of a transaction and all that. You can please feel free to take a look of that. Hopefully that will give you some high-level ideas as well.
Absolutely.
Do you use POS or a derivative POS? We use delegated proof of stake. Is it POS or NPOS?
Same person.
Same person. Yeah. Still delegated. How many TPS can we expect at mainnet launch?
TPS is related to, well, I mean, if you don't have load, then you're not going to be pushing the system to its maximum. It's also related to the machinery that you're running on top of, the distribution of those nodes, And there's just a lot of different elements right there.
And the type of transactions.
Like there's just so many different variables that like it wouldn't make sense for us to commit to one thing or other. We will have performance evaluations that are reproducible out there so that folks that want to run it in an environment can evaluate the maximum throughput. But it's really going to be driven by the demands of the ecosystem. And I think I mentioned this last week where if people are saying, hey, I need this to run faster, what are the knobs that I can turn to make it run faster? Well, one is we can always increase the maximum stake required to run a validator. We can ask that the validators that are running increase their machine resources. We can increase the throughput. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of different knobs here. We can increase the batching size of the number of transactions in a block. And so it's really going to be dependent on the demand on how we imagine this evolves over time. But we're very confident that we're going to hit very high TPS numbers.
In the first Medium post, The Genesis of Aptos, Mo wrote that Aptos provides novel methods for parallel execution, a key enabler of speed at scale. Would you mind going into detail on that?
We already published it.
So if you look last week, I believe Sasha and Rati made a Medium post that will do far greater justice than we can hope to do in this session. But effectively, the goal is to find transactions that don't have overlapping data sets so that they can run in parallel. And when they do find that there is, I think, these kind of conflicts, that they run them in serial at the end of the operation. And so in that practice, I think the blog or the tweet or the blog said something about 160,000 TPS in evaluation.
James already sent the blog links to the channel, so feel free to check in.
Yes,
and if you have further questions, feel free just to send it to dev discussions. We're happy to answer them there.
Yep. Yeah. The links for both the Move repo as well as link to the block STM paper are both in the Move language channel.
And as Kun said earlier, the code is written, it's available, and it will be enabled within the next dev net cycle or two.
How do you manage transactions in blockchain to have 160K transactions per second, please?
I think that's the
In the
same
paper.
question,
Yes.
kind of. Yeah, please read the blog post, ask questions, especially since this is a very technical topic. I would prefer that we do it more in appropriate medium.
Paper.
Yeah.
Academic paper.
Is the team considering enterprise use cases that require a light and tidy L1 as a more equitable alternative to Ethereum and associated flavors of ETH?
We're absolutely open to any participation partnerships in that space. I mean, if you look back at the legacy of where we're coming from, that's effectively what this blockchain was initially built for.
Let's see. Questions about creating community content, I cannot answer, but James does have fantastic, I'm not sure if it's weekly or not, but there are community meetings that James does host, and that question would be a great one to ask in one of the community channels in our Discord, and James would absolutely hop on and answer that for you.
Wednesday at the same time as this event, 2 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Universal Time, of office hours for all kinds of questions, especially about participating.
If you don't limit the number of validators, you'll have difficulties to get a good number of transactions. Are we going to limit validators and so use NPOS instead of POS?
What's the question?
If we limit the number of validators, we will have difficulties to access a good number of transactions. Are we going to limit validators to become NPOS?
So this goes back into, so if we just focus on the model that we're launching for incentivized testnet, one, the validators will need to open up their networking ports to allow for full nodes to connect to them, much like we've done in our current DevNet deployment. And as we scale up towards the end, especially when we get to the DDoS story, there will be additional requirements beyond just running a validator. You'll have to run a full node that other full nodes can get connected to. And so this is effectively a mempool model where you imagine transactions come in from somewhere in your networking topology and they brought their way through the tree up to the validator core. Hopefully that answers your question.
And we have Will you guys talk a bit more about the codebase architecture and crates implementation for those who want a pull request? I think that's, if there are any specific questions around that, I think that would be good to potentially ask in the dev discussion. We've been talking about writing some guides on how Git flow and how committing to a repository would work to make it easier.
You're always welcome to make the pull request, and then we can give you some comments on it or whatever from there.
Or you create an issue, or you go on to Discord and make a comment. I think if you look around, you'll see we're quick to jump on and work with folks. So excited to have any collaboration.
Are there bridges on the horizon? Which ones are in consideration? Talks are ongoing with some bridges. We absolutely welcome any and all. We are an open L1, so if you have some, if you want to build one, please do. We would absolutely love to talk to you.
Is that it from the questions?
I think that's it for the written questions.
Should we get to the raise hands?
Yeah.
We got 11 minutes, folks. Let's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for waiting, Paul69. Hey, Paul. You're on mute.
Hi everybody, do you hear me?
Yes, hi Paul.
First of all, I would like to thank James. During this time, he did a lot of for the community. Seeing great results. Also, it became clear where to go and what to do. Work in the community, I think, starting to get well organized. And I think the first results are coming soon. I have a question about Aptos education. I think it is necessary to develop the ecosystem and increase the knowledge and understanding of the move language. And what do you think about this?
Absolutely. I mean, that's definitely something that we've spent a lot of time trying to plan and trying to build to choose various tactics to get to. We have a technical writer starting soon who's going to help us with documentation as well as some of the tutorials, some papers. For us, even working with James on a couple of things, we'd really love to get to a kind of move university in the future where we have a bunch of tutorials, potentially starting small and building towards larger end-to-end projects. I personally learned a lot from like the crypto zombies type of games on Ethereum, and then a similar one when I was learning how to develop for Solana. So I'd very much like to see one of those. It's just a matter of getting enough people, or hopefully with help from the community, getting those projects started and there to help other people.
Okay, thanks. I also have some suggestions. It is possible training school, as you mentioned, and maybe you are interested in other options. It's also some application in a format game. For example, like learning the movie language, some step by step or something interesting.
Absolutely.
The second can be maybe some kind of book or web page where you can choose your level of programming knowledge, and as well as you understanding cryptocurrencies and all knowledge in cryptocurrencies. And according to this level, it returns you to the central amount of information for study. For example, a beginner can learn everything from the basics, and an advice user can also find some advantages and difference in movie language.
Yes, I absolutely love everything you're saying. I highly recommend, mainly because we want to answer technical questions. I absolutely love what you're proposing. If you could type that up and throw that either
In
in
suggestion
the
channel.
suggestion channel, or make it an issue in GitHub, we definitely want to work together and to get to that kind of granularity.
Yeah, please send us your favorite applications or any great suggestion on how can we make those type of tutorial available.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Because there are a lot of people who have different types of knowledge and different types of skills, and they need to connect with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you for the attention. Good luck.
Thank you.
I'll just say there will be opportunities for contributions in that realm of education. For incentivized testnet, we focus on improving documentation and translating the guides for node operators around the world, also engaging developers with bounties, and learning Move is a big part of that. So wanting to figure out what people need to do in order to get there. And that's just a starting point. So we'll be trying to build out iterative structures and processes that enable a sustainable growth and development of our education community around a platform like the ones you described. And we'll continue building in the open. That's the best way to avoid any duplication of efforts and coordinate around the shared goals we have to maximize opportunities.
So Dolab asks, can you clarify our partnership with Pontum? Will they be building user applications or developer tooling? And similarly, how will Pontum integrate the Aptos blockchain?
Pontum has been involved in the space for a long time. They were probably the preeminent ecosystem developers for DM. And when there was an opportunity for us to build a stronger relationship with them, both of us jumped at the opportunity. It's still very early days. Actually, we just had a cross-team meet and greet last week. It was fantastic. I didn't realize there were so many people named Max in the world. And details will be forthcoming, but I'm very excited about it.
There is no connection to Polkadot, though. That is separate. They will be building.
We're working together on ecosystem problems together, so it's going to be great for people that have been following Pontum for a while now, and people that have been saying, Aptos, where's your ecosystem stuff? And so I'm really looking forward to. I know we've got this massive ecosystem growing here, but they bring in the knowledge and experience that they've been in the space for a lot longer. And so, like I said, we're still brainstorming together. We're going to come up. Just like it took us a little while to come up with the incentivized testnet plan that we shared with you today, like that wasn't something that we generated yesterday night. So although it did feel like it, it takes time to build out these types of roadmaps and plans. And since that was just came together last week, it's going to be a couple of weeks at least before we can share more details exactly the nature of how we see us developing things together. But I'm super stoked about it. And so is everybody else.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Any hands raised? No? Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another fantastic edition of Move Mondays. We will see you Wednesday, potentially, for some of us will see you Wednesday for the community call, less developer oriented. And then we will see you next Monday, same time, same place for Move Monday again. Have a good week, everyone.
Thank you all.